Hello and welcome to an action-packed week where we identify a massive exposure of 184 million user logins exposed to the outside world. We look at how one gang targets and has a process to demand payments. And finally, we move into the EU, where they're at it again. I mean, they're kind of like staying one step ahead of things, and they're leading the way with an AI Act. And what messages does this send to the rest of us? Is the questions really that we're asking. So, hi Robert,
Nick.
back on the wagon. So this one's affecting Home Affairs here in Australia, allegedly. So we're talking about more than 184 million user logins for the likes of the Department of Home Affairs, Facebook, Google, and many others that have been exposed in what appears to be a large info stealer campaign. There's a researcher called Jeremiah Fowler, and he reports, I saw thousands of files that included emails, usernames, passwords, and the URL links to the login or authentication for accounts. Beyond the initial findings, Mr. Fowler claims that he's identified account credentials linked to health platforms, banking and financial accounts, and government services across the globe, including the Australian Department of Home Affairs. And specifically the Visa and Citizenship Application Platform IMI account. Now, this is a story that was released in the Information Age on the 27th of May 2025. You've had a look at this story too, Robert? I mean, I'm
hmm
guessing there's some observations that you've got around this one as well.
Yeah, so I think from the reporting, it's unclear that this database that Mr. Fowler came across, what it was being used for, whether it was being used for criminal purposes, or it could have even just been some sort of research project. Don't know. He contacted the owners of that the website that was hosting, or the host of that particular website where that data was. They shut down public access to it, so it's no longer exposed. So there's that. And I think towards the end of that article, they spoke with Troy Hunt, who is an Australian software expert who runs a website called Have I Been Owned, which is quite a useful website, quite a useful resource for those that aren't aware of it. And you can go onto that website, put an email address in, and it will tell you whether that email has been compromised. Now, Mr. Hunt said he tried to contact Mr. Fowler just to kind of check on that data because it could be old data. It could have been around for years. So I think the takeaway from me is that, look, there's been so many data breaches over the years. So much information has been exposed onto the dark web. The lesson here, I think, is not to panic. This may not be new data; it may be old data, but it's a reminder to think about the passwords that you use. Perhaps maybe to refresh those passwords on a regular basis. Think about using a password manager. Even start off by putting those email addresses that you use on a regular basis into Have I Been Owned or similar sorts of services to figure out whether those emails have been compromised, and then do something about it.
Yeah, it doesn't take very much in terms of imagination to work out that if you've got a Google account, a Facebook account, a LinkedIn account, a Department of, all of a sudden it's 184 million, sort of like access and what have you. But you're right. I mean, this whole thing around being able to change your passwords regularly or roll them and do whatever you need to do using multi-factor authentication or in some way, shape, or form to be able to do that, I think is a really good start. I
Yeah.
did also notice that there was a lady from Queensland University, Queensland, sorry, who told the Information Age about the massive size of the leak wouldn't deter data brokers from attempting to sell it. So, again, be on your metal, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So moving on then, I think it was a really interesting one, this one. So how a ransom gang, in this particular instance, Lockbit, negotiates payments. And this is again from the Information Age. Don't go to the police or the FBI for help, and don't tell anyone that we attacked you, is the opening gambit from this particular group to a range of smaller businesses by the look of it, not exactly large businesses. They seem to be taking, sort of anything between 5 and 50 $1,000 of sitting. And it seems to be a very, very highly organized and very, I suppose, casual kind of an arrangement whereby they are telling you how to go through this process. They will help you out of it. But if you don't comply, then they will lock your data out and you won't get it back, or they will sell it to the highest bidder. So what else was it they said? They said that you'll be left with encrypted files and your business will die. Write to the chat room and wait for an answer. We'll guarantee a response from us. Those who follow this link are ushered into a private chat room where the operatives from Lockbit negotiate those ransoms and provide file decryption instructions and collect thousands in illicit cryptocurrencies. Again, this is all in Bitcoin and the like. Information Age have reviewed 12 of those leaked chats and found that Lockbit only secured payments of $87,500, but ran its extortion operations with surprisingly systematic help desk-like approach. So who are you? Where are you from? All the other bits and pieces. We know who you are. We've had experience of this in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've both heard an excerpt from a call made between what sounded like a Russian-based ransomware gang to a local company, and it was just really interesting to just hear how cool, calm, collected the information was, how they knew all the details about their target. It's quite an interesting insight to see how sophisticated some of these ransomware gangs are, and like you mentioned, they have an organizational structure, they have a different hierarchies, they have chat support, they have technical support, and if you're having trouble with their de-encrypting software, then you can put a question in the chat and they'll escalate it to their internal tech support. So yeah, quite incredible. There was, I think, some commentary from Jamie O'Reilly, who runs a cybersecurity company down in Sydney, and I think his insight was it takes an organization that has done this hundreds, if not thousands, of times to be just so cold and calculating when they go through this process of once they've breached a company, to go through this process of negotiating a ransom and then potentially de-encrypting that data. So just very cold, calculating, no emotion. This is just business. This is all about money. It was also interesting to see that the willingness to negotiate, because they might set a fairly high figure to be paid in Bitcoin, but they generally are willing to negotiate because even if they get half that amount, it's probably worth it to them to have gone through this whole process. So I think it's quite eye-opening, quite chilling to sort of know what organizations are up against when it comes to some of these sophisticated ransomware gangs. Having said that, I think are shut down at the moment. I think they got hacked themselves. You shut one ransomware gang down and another 10 pop up from that. So the threat doesn't really ease significantly. So yeah, you have to be on your guard. And then even more so, as we've been chatting about, Nick, outside of this, is that under the Cybersecurity Act, Australian companies with a turnover of $3 million or more now have to report any ransomware payments that are made. So, and there's a whole sort of discussion that we probably don't have time for in terms of, well, as we know, a lot of organizations do pay the ransom. There needs to be some due diligence that goes into that because you have to think about anti-money laundering, counterterrorism funding laws and making sure you're not in breach of those if you're going to pay a ransom. But aside from that, you now need to report any ransomware payments that are made through to the ASD and the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. So that's something that's just recently come into force and something to be aware of.
Yeah, to me, it's just, I mean, these people are, extorting smaller amounts of money from smaller companies, which does indicate that it's not all about, the FTSE 100 index, sort of companies, group of companies like Marks and Spencers that are at risk here. This is mums and pops at home with small businesses that are getting extorted as well. So please, please, please be on your mettle, be on your guard, understand what the problems might be. Speak to somebody that understands how this stuff works rather than adopting that she'll be right kind of attitude. Finally, we wanted to highlight the fact that Europe is at it again, staying one step ahead. They want to see themselves. There was an article that was brought to my attention by Florian Malecki, who works at Thales. He's the head of partnerships in Europe. So AI is here and it's already changing societies. Can regulators help the sector to flourish and also keep people safe? Well, the EU seem to think so. European Commission announced a 200 billion euro investment program to make Europe a leading force in AI. So that shows how much they believe that this is going to be an act of the future. So there's more to AI than commerce. There's also safety to protect its citizens. The European Union drafted the Artificial Intelligence Act. So it creates a uniform legal regime for all EU member states, and it's the world's first major regulatory framework for AI. Now then, I'm going to quote here something that's been put up, and it says, by developing a strong regulatory framework based upon human rights and fundamental values, the EU can develop an AI ecosystem that benefits everyone. Big words, big statement, quite impressive.
Yeah, and I think we'll have to keep things brief. Unfortunately, Nick, I know we're running out of time again. But yeah, look, I mean, the EU tends to lead the globe in terms of these sorts of regulations. I mean, we've talked at length around GDPR, and they're taking the lead when it comes to AI, LLMs, whatever you want to call it, machine learning. And so this legislation got introduced in August 2024. There's a 2-year transitioning period. They've been sending some updates through, defining what AI means, putting out codes of practice. So they've been slowly kind of releasing more information. So for anyone that does business in the EU, they need to be aware of this, and particularly when it comes to AI, LLMs, ML, and it's a very much a risk-based piece of legislation. So they categorize AI, for want of a better term, into different risk categories: low risk, high risk, unacceptable, I think systemic. And if you're in that high risk sector in particular, then you need to be doing an assessment. You need to be complying with that assessment. You have like a CE mark on your AI product, like you might see for other products within the European Union. And if you don't comply, the fines are massive. And as we've seen under GDPR, the EU are not shy of whacking large fines onto organizations that don't comply. So I think where it comes down to, so it's risk driven, but obviously you need that oversight. You need that governance within your organization to figure out what frameworks are you going to be using to make sure that you're complying with this particular legislation. But as we've chatted about previously, you can't just set and forget when it comes to AI, because more often than not, you do not know what that large language model, that piece of AI or ML is actually doing, and the decisions it makes today may not be the same as it makes tomorrow. So you need humans in the loop as part of your governance and oversight to make sure that those decisions are not leading to harm for, in this case, people within the EU. So I think those are the critical points to get across.
Yeah, so risk driven, risk led, risk documented, but it's really the governance piece with a big G in this that's going to make a difference. Robert,
Absolutely.
that was Chat DPS for this week. Looking forward to catching up with you very soon.
Thank you.